My name is Samantha Wilson, and at 34, I thought I had my life figured out. As a financial advisor in Boston, I've always prided myself on making smart decisions with money, both mine and my clients. The family cabin in Vermont had been our sanctuary for 40 years, the place where my grandparents taught me to fish and where I felt most at peace. When my parents faced foreclosure, I secretly paid $175,000 to save it, my entire house down payment fund. Then last month, I discovered they'd quietly transferred the deed to my younger sister Lily instead. Before I continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Hit that subscribe button and drop your location in the comments. I could really use some support right now as I share what happened next. The Cedar Pines cabin, as my grandfather called it, wasn't particularly grand, but it was magical to me. Built in the summer of 1978 by my grandfather Charles with his own two hands, it sat on 3 acres bordered by white pines and a small spring-fed lake. The scent of pine and wood smoke still triggers a flood of memories whenever I encounter it. My earliest memory of the cabin dates back to when I was 5. Grandpa Charles took me fishing at dawn, the mist still rising off the lake's surface. I remember how patiently he showed me how to thread a worm onto a hook, his weathered hands guiding my small ones. "Gentle but firm, Sammy," he'd say. Just like life. When I caught my first sunfish, you would have thought I'd landed a marlin from the way he cheered. Every summer from ages 5 to 15, I spent at least a month at Cedar Pines. I learned to identify every bird that visited our feeders, chickadees, nuthatches, the occasional indigo bunting. Grandpa taught me to track deer through the woods, to identify edible berries, and to navigate using just the sun and stars. By age 10, I could build a fire from scratch faster than anyone else in the family. The traditions we established became the framework of my childhood. The 4th of July meant homemade ice cream cranked by hand on the porch, watching fireworks reflect across the lake. Thanksgiving brought the whole extended family together around the massive oak dining table my grandfather had crafted from a tree that fell on the property. We'd play charades by lamplight when the inevitable November power outages hit. Lily, 7 years younger than me, had a completely different relationship with the cabin. While I embraced the rustic setting, she complained constantly from the moment our parents' car pulled up the gravel driveway. "There are bugs everywhere," she would whine, swatting at mosquitoes that somehow seemed to target only her. When she was 12, she staged a full protest about the lack of internet. "How am I supposed to talk to my friends? This place is prehistoric." Meanwhile, I was happily reading books on the dock or helping Grandma Jean prepare meals from vegetables we grew in the small garden plot. Lily would spend most of her time indoors, sighing dramatically when invited to join family activities. "Another hike? We did that yesterday. It's so boring." What Lily never understood was that the cabin was more than a vacation spot for me. It was sanctuary. When I was 8, my parents' arguments became more frequent, their voices carrying through our suburban home's walls no matter how many pillows I piled over my head. But at the cabin, they seemed to remember why they'd fallen in love. Something about the place smoothed their rough edges, at least temporarily. I remember the summer when I was 13, sitting on the cabin's screened porch with Grandpa Charles while a thunderstorm raged. My parents were having financial troubles, something I wasn't supposed to know about but had overheard during one of their late-night arguments. "This place," Grandpa said, gesturing to the cabin around us, "is the Wilson family anchor, Sammy. No matter what storms come, it keeps us from drifting too far apart." 3 years later, Grandpa Charles was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He declined rapidly, and by autumn, the family gathered at the cabin for what we knew would be his final visit. I sat beside his bed in the main bedroom, holding his hand as the fall leaves blazed outside the window. "Promise me something, Sammy," he whispered, his voice thin but determined. "Anything." "Grandpa," I said, fighting back tears. "Keep this place in the family. It's more than wood and nails. It's our history, our future." I squeezed his hand. "I promise." He died 2 weeks later, and standing by his grave, I silently renewed that vow. The cabin would stay in our family no matter what. I would make sure of it. Lily didn't come to the funeral. At 15, she had a dance competition that same weekend, and my parents decided it was important for her development not to miss it. I remembered watching them drive away to take her to the competition the morning of the funeral, leaving me to ride with my aunt and uncle. Looking back, perhaps that was the first clear sign of where their priorities lay, but I was too grief-stricken to recognize it then. In the years that followed, I visited the cabin whenever I could, often alone. I'd sit in Grandpa's hand-carved rocking chair on the porch, listening to the loons call across the lake, and feel his presence. I'd run my fingers over the initials he had carved into the main support beam, CW plus JW, surrounded by a rough heart. Charles and Jean Wilson, a love that had built not just a cabin, but a family legacy. It was during those quiet visits that I made a promise to myself. Whatever it took, I would preserve this place that had shaped me. The cabin would remain our family anchor, just as Grandpa had said. I could never have imagined then how much that promise would cost me, or how little it would seem to matter to the rest of my family. Unlike many of my college classmates, I couldn't rely on my parents to fund my education. By the time I graduated high school in 2009, the recession had hit my family hard. Dad's construction business was barely staying afloat, and Mom's part-time bookkeeping job couldn't make up the difference. I cobbled together a financial aid package at Boston University, academic scholarships, federal loans, and work study. Even then, I waited tables at a busy restaurant near Fenway Park 4 nights a week and worked as a campus tour guide on weekends. Sleep became a luxury. But I graduated with honors and a job offer from a respected financial advisory firm. My starting salary was modest, but I lived with 3 roommates in a cramped apartment, brought lunch from home every day, and tracked every penny. Within 3 years, I earned my first major promotion. By 28, I had my own roster of clients who appreciated my straightforward approach to financial planning. The trick to building wealth isn't making a lot of money, I would tell my clients. It's being intentional with the money you have. I followed my own advice, setting aside at least 30% of each paycheck for savings and investments. Meanwhile, Lily's path took a dramatically different turn. She started at NYU but dropped out after 3 semesters, declaring college too restrictive for her creative spirit. My parents nodded understandingly, never mentioning the student loans they had co-signed. Over the next 5 years, Lily launched a series of businesses. A custom jewelry line that folded after 6 months, an organic smoothie delivery service that never turned a profit, and a social media consultancy that consisted primarily of posting on her own highly curated Instagram account. Each venture began with excitement and ended with my parents opening their checkbooks. "Lily's finding her way," Mom would say during our weekly phone calls. "Not everyone is as naturally disciplined as you, Sam." My father would add, "She's got the entrepreneurial spirit. Just needs the right opportunity to make it work." I bit my tongue, remembering the entrepreneurial spirit that had nearly bankrupted Dad's construction company when he expanded too quickly in 2007. In 2022, I was in the middle of a client meeting when my phone lit up with Mom's face. She never called during work hours unless it was an emergency, so I excused myself. "Mom, is everything okay?" Her voice came through shaky, tearful. "It's the cabin, Sam. We're going to lose it." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean lose it?" The story spilled out between sobs. Dad had taken a second mortgage on the cabin 5 years earlier to invest in Lily's jewelry business. Then they refinanced again to cover their own mounting expenses when Dad needed back surgery and couldn't work for 6 months. Now they were 18 months behind on payments, and the bank was initiating foreclosure. "How much?" I asked, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "$175,000, Mom whispered. "We need it in 30 days or it's gone." That evening, I sat in my apartment with all my financial statements spread across my dining table. I had been saving for a down payment on a condo in Cambridge, building my funds slowly but steadily. The balance, $182,000. I could save the cabin, but it would mean putting my own life plans on hold indefinitely. Boston's housing market wasn't getting any cheaper, and it had taken me nearly a decade to save this much. I thought about Grandpa Charles, about his hands building that place board by board. I remembered my promise at his bedside. The cabin wasn't just property, it was the physical embodiment of our family's history. The next morning, I called my bank and initiated the transfer. Then I called my mother. I found a solution. I said, "A family preservation fund that can help with the cabin." "What? How?" Her voice lifted with hope. "It doesn't matter how. What matters is that the cabin stays in the family. For all of us, just like Grandpa wanted. Promise me that, Mom." "Of course, sweetie. The cabin will always be our family place. You know that." 2 days later, I flew to Vermont to meet with my parents and their bank. I signed documents listing me as the family representative, making the payment, but kept the source of funds vague. My parents didn't ask too many questions, relief overshadowing their curiosity. That night, sitting on the cabin's porch, my father put his arm around me. "You've always been our rock, Sam." I leaned into his embrace, thinking not about the money, but about preserving what mattered most. The transaction had wiped out my savings, but watching the sunset over the lake, I felt a sense of peace. Some things were worth the sacrifice. When I flew back to Boston, I moved into a smaller apartment to reduce my expenses and started rebuilding my savings. I calculated it would take approximately 7 years to replace what I'd spent, longer if the housing market continued to rise. But whenever I felt a pang of regret, I'd look at the photo on my desk. Me and Grandpa Charles on the cabin dock, fishing poles in hand, both grinning widely. What I didn't know then was that family loyalty isn't always a two-way street. The Boston winter of 2023 had been particularly brutal, both in weather and workload. By April, I was desperate for a break, and with the tax season rush finally ebbing, I decided to surprise myself with a long weekend at the cabin. The thought of 3 days alone with nothing but the lake and my thoughts felt like the perfect reset. I didn't tell my family I was coming. The cabin had always been open to any family member who wanted to use it, no reservation required. That had been our way since Grandpa's time. The 4-hour drive from Boston to northeastern Vermont was therapeutic in itself. As I turned onto the familiar gravel road leading to the cabin, the tension in my shoulders began to ease. Then I rounded the final bend and slammed on my brakes. A large dumpster sat in the clearing beside the cabin. Construction vehicles lined the normally empty space where we used to set up badminton nets in summer. The cabin itself was surrounded by scaffolding, and the distinctive red-painted door had been removed, a plastic sheet flapping in its place. Confused, I parked and approached a man in a flannel shirt who appeared to be supervising the work. "Excuse me, what's happening here?" I asked. He turned, clipboard in hand. "Interior renovation and expansion." "You a neighbor?" "No, I'm Samantha Wilson. This is my family's cabin." His expression shifted slightly. "Oh, you must be the sister. The owner didn't mention you'd be stopping by." A cold feeling spread through my chest. "The owner, Ms. Lily Wilson. She hired us last month for the full remodel. We're converting the place into a luxury rental, adding a master suite, upgrading the kitchen, putting in a hot tub on that new deck we're building out back." I stood frozen, trying to process his words. "Owner? Luxury rental? There must be a mistake," I said finally. "This cabin belongs to my parents." He shrugged. "Not according to the paperwork I've got. Ms. Wilson showed us the deed when we started. Everything's in her name." I mumbled something about checking into the situation and retreated to my car. With shaking hands, I called my mother. "Mom, what's going on at the cabin? There's construction everywhere." A long pause followed. "Oh, you're at the cabin? We didn't know you were visiting." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible. "Why is there a contractor who thinks Lily owns this place?" Another pause, longer this time. I heard muffled voices, my mother covering the phone to speak to someone else. When she returned, her voice was tight, uncomfortable. "Honey, we were going to tell you once everything was settled. Your father and I transferred the cabin to Lily last month. She needed a fresh start after her business setbacks, and since you're already so successful in Boston, you gave her the cabin?" I interrupted, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. The family cabin that I paid $175,000 to save last year? Sam, please understand. Lily has struggled so much to find her path. You've always been the independent one, the achiever. You don't need our help like she does. I ended the call without responding and sat in my car, staring at the cabin at the place I had sacrificed so much to preserve, now being gutted and transformed into a source of income for my sister. Almost on autopilot, I got out and walked toward the cabin again. The front door was propped open now, and I stepped inside. The interior was nearly unrecognizable. Walls had been stripped to the studs. The stone fireplace where we had hung Christmas stockings for decades was half demolished. But what broke me was the sight of the dumpster contents. Leaning over the metal edge, I saw Grandpa's handmade furniture, the oak dining table, the rocking chairs, the hand-carved bed frames splintered and discarded like worthless junk. Next to them lay boxes of family photos, fishing gear, the antique quilts Grandma had preserved for generations. Tears blurred my vision as I rescued a small wooden box from the debris. It was the chess set Grandpa had carved for my 10th birthday, each piece unique and imperfect in the most perfect way. A car door slammed behind me, and I turned to see Lily walking toward me, her designer boots crunching on the gravel, smartphone in hand. Sam, what are you doing here? Her surprise seemed genuine, but there was something defensive in her posture. I held up the chess set. What am I doing here? What are you doing throwing away our family history? She sighed dramatically. It's just old junk, Sam. The designer said we need to clean slate for the renovation. We're going for a modern rustic vibe that will photograph well for the Airbnb listing. Airbnb listing? The words felt bitter on my tongue. Yes, isn't it brilliant? Premium vacation rentals in this area go for $800 a night in peak season. The renovation will pay for itself within 2 years. I stared at her, trying to recognize the sister I had grown up with. This isn't what the cabin was meant for, Lily. Grandpa built this place for the family, not as a business opportunity. She rolled her eyes. Grandpa's been gone for years, Sam. We need to be practical. Mom and Dad aren't getting any younger. And this place can generate real income instead of sitting empty most of the year. It's not empty. I use it. The cousins use it. It's our family gathering place. And it still can be. She said in a placating tone that made my skin crawl. You can still visit when it's not booked. Something inside me snapped. I paid for this cabin, Lily. $175,000 of my savings to keep it from foreclosure last year. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows shot up. What are you talking about? Mom and Dad said they worked out a payment plan with the bank. There was no payment plan. I paid off the entire remaining mortgage to save this place. For a moment, doubt flickered across her face, but then her expression hardened. If that's true, why would you keep it a secret? That doesn't make any sense. Because I didn't want Mom and Dad to feel indebted to me. I did it to preserve our family legacy, not for recognition. She crossed her arms. Well, if you didn't get anything in writing, that's on you. The deed is in my name now. Legally, the cabin is mine. As we stood there facing each other, the contractor approached cautiously. Everything okay here, Ms. Wilson? It's fine. Dave, Lily answered without taking her eyes off me. My sister was just leaving. I clutched the chess set to my chest and walked back to my car, a storm of emotions making it hard to breathe. This betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined, not just because of the money, but because of what the cabin represented, a promise I had kept while my family had broken theirs without a second thought. The drive back to Boston should have taken 4 hours. It took 6 because I had to pull over twice when tears made it impossible to see the road. By the time I reached my apartment, emotional exhaustion had given way to a cold, clear anger. I spent the weekend gathering documents, bank statements, transfer records, the agreement I'd signed at the bank as family representative. Monday morning, I called my parents. We need to talk. All of us. Tonight. My tone left no room for negotiation. Honey, we're having dinner with the Pattersons tonight, my mother began. Cancel it, I interrupted. This is about the cabin. And it can't wait. There was a brief silence. Lily mentioned you were upset. Upset doesn't begin to cover it. I'll be at your house at 7. Make sure Lily is there. I took the afternoon off work and drove to my parents' suburban home outside Boston. My father answered the door, his expression a mixture of confusion and defensiveness. Sam, I wish you'd explain what this emergency is about. I walked past him into the living room where my mother and Lily were already seated, both looking uncomfortable. Where's Uncle Robert? I asked, noting his absence. You didn't say anything about Robert being here, my father responded. I called him separately. He should be here any minute. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. My father's older brother had always been the family straight shooter, the one person who could be counted on for unvarnished honesty. Once we were all seated, I placed a folder on the coffee table and withdrew several documents. Last year, when Mom called me about losing the cabin to foreclosure, I did something I never told you about. I laid out the bank statements and transfer records. I used my entire house down payment fund, $175,000, to pay off the mortgage. My mother gasped. That family preservation fund you mentioned, that was your money? Every penny, I confirmed. Money I'd saved for 8 years to buy my own place. My father picked up the bank statement, his face paling as he examined the figures. Sam, we had no idea. Clearly, I said. Because if you had, I have to believe you wouldn't have given the cabin to Lily without even discussing it with me. Lily leaned forward. You should have told them where the money came from. And you should have asked questions about where $175,000 magically appeared from, I shot back. Or did you think financial fairies just swooped in to save the day? Uncle Robert, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. James, Sarah, how could you do this? After what Sam did for the family. My father's face flushed. We didn't know it was her money. And besides, Sam is financially secure. She has a successful career, a good income. Lily needs help establishing herself. So you reward her latest failure by giving her a property worth over $500,000? I asked incredulously. It's not a reward. My mother interjected tearfully. We thought it was fair. You have everything else, Sam, the stable job, the savings, the bright future. Lily needs this opportunity. The words hit me like a physical blow. Everything else? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed to have that stable job? The 60-hour weeks? The vacations I never take? The dates I cancel because a client needs me? I built my life brick by brick while you wrote check after check to cover Lily's mistakes. That's not fair, Lily protested. No. What's not fair is throwing away Grandpa's handmade furniture that he spent years crafting. What's not fair is turning a family legacy into a cash grab. The argument escalated, with years of unspoken resentments suddenly finding voice. My mother cried, my father's face grew increasingly red, and Lily alternated between defensive counterattacks and wounded victim posturing. The cabin has always meant more to you than to Lily, my father argued. But that doesn't give you ownership rights. Actually, paying the mortgage kind of does, Uncle Robert pointed out dryly. There was no written agreement, my father countered. Just a family understanding. An understanding you completely disregarded, I said. I saved that cabin because Grandpa made me promise it would stay in the family, for the family. Not become a luxury rental property. It's still in the family, Lily insisted. Just in my name. I stood up, gathering my documents. I want joint ownership. The cabin belongs to both of us, or this becomes a legal matter. Lily's eyes widened. You would see your own family? You didn't seem concerned about family when you were throwing away our history. I turned to my parents. I've never asked you for anything. Not college tuition, not help with rent. Not a single dollar since I turned 18. The one time I made a sacrifice for this family, you took advantage of it. We didn't know, my mother cried again. But now you do, I replied. So, what are you going to do about it? Lily stood up. I'm not sharing ownership. The deed is in my name, and that's final. I looked at each of them, the people I had believed would always have my back, and felt something break inside me. Without another word, I walked out, ignoring my mother's tearful calls to come back. The drive back to Boston was a blur. For the first time in my life, I understood that the family I had sacrificed so much for didn't value those sacrifices at all. The realization was more painful than I could have imagined. For the first time in my professional life, I called in sick the next day. And the day after that. By the third day, I contacted HR to request a week of personal leave, something I'd never done despite having accumulated over 2 months of unused vacation time. My boss, concerned by this unprecedented behavior, called me directly. "Sam, is everything all right? This isn't like you." "Family emergency," I managed to say, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Take the time you need," he said. "Your clients are covered." I spent those days alternating between numbness and waves of anger so intense they left me gasping. I didn't answer calls from my parents or Lily. But I did respond to text messages from Uncle Robert, who had appointed himself mediator in the crisis. On the 4th day of my self-imposed isolation, my best friend Rachel appeared at my door with grocery bags and a determined expression. "You haven't answered my texts for 3 days," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. "I'm officially intervening." As she unpacked soup, bread, and a bottle of wine, I found myself telling her everything from the childhood memories at the cabin to the devastating betrayal. Rachel, an attorney with a Boston law firm, listened without interrupting. When I finished, she refilled our wine glasses and said, "You need to talk to a property lawyer." "I can't sue my family," I said automatically. "You can't let them steal $175,000 from you either," she countered. "At least know your options." The next morning, with Rachel's encouragement, I met with Patricia Hernandez, a property attorney recommended by Rachel's firm. Patricia's office was warm and inviting, belying the sharp legal mind behind her friendly smile. She reviewed my documents carefully before speaking. "You have a case," she said finally. "It's not clear-cut, but there's enough here to argue fraudulent misrepresentation or unjust enrichment." "What does that mean in practical terms?" I asked. "It means we could file a lawsuit demanding either repayment of the money or a proportional ownership interest in the property. The fact that you made the payment with a specific understanding of how the property would be used works in your favor. And if we lose?" She leaned back in her chair. "Then you're out the legal fees plus the money you've already lost. But based on what you've shown me, I think a judge would be sympathetic to your position." I nodded, absorbing this information. "What would you recommend?" "Honestly, a strongly worded letter from me outlining the legal issues might be enough to bring them to the negotiating table. Most people want to avoid court if possible." I left her office with a strange mix of validation and dread. I had options, but none of them would restore what I'd lost beyond the money, my trust in my family. That evening, Uncle Robert called. "How are you holding up, kiddo?" His gruff voice was comforting in its familiarity. "I've been better," I admitted. "I saw a lawyer today." He sighed. "I was afraid it might come to that. For what it's worth, I think you're in the right here. And I'm not the only one who feels that way." "What do you mean?" "Your Aunt Martha called your mother yesterday and gave her an earful about how they've treated you. Cousin Jessica refused to attend their dinner party last night over it. The extended family is pretty unified in thinking they've done you wrong." I hadn't expected that kind of support. "Have they said anything to you about reconsidering?" "Your father is being stubborn, as usual. Your mother is torn. Lily." He paused. "Lily is Lily. But they're feeling the pressure, Sam. This pattern of favoring her has been obvious to the rest of us for years." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled over Boston. For the first time, I allowed myself to examine the deeper patterns in my family dynamic, how I had always been expected to be the responsible one, the achiever. The one who didn't need attention or support because I was so capable. How many times had I heard variations of "Sam will be fine" or "Sam always lands on her feet," while resources and concern were lavished on Lily's latest crisis. I had built my identity around being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need help. In doing so, had I enabled my family's unequal treatment? Had my self-sufficiency become a weapon they used against me? The next day, I called the therapist whose number had been sitting in my contacts for months. Dr. Marshall had been recommended by a colleague who'd gone through a difficult divorce, but I had always been too busy to make that first appointment. Now it felt necessary. In that first session, I poured out the story once again, but this time with a focus on the patterns rather than just the recent betrayal. It sounds like you've spent a lifetime seeking approval through achievement, Dr. Marshall observed. Has that strategy ever gotten you what you really wanted from your parents? The question hit harder than I expected. No, I admitted. It just raised the bar for what they expected from me. Over the next 2 weeks, as I gradually returned to work and my normal routines, Dr. Marshall helped me see how my people-pleasing and conflict avoidance had contributed to the current situation. You've never clearly communicated your needs or set boundaries with your family, she pointed out. You've been hoping they would recognize your sacrifices without you having to explicitly ask for that recognition. Because they should see it on their own, I argued. Perhaps, she acknowledged. But they don't. So now you have a choice about how to move forward in a way that honors your needs. That night, I sat down at my computer and began drafting an email to my family. Not an emotional plea, but a clear, factual statement of my position and my options. I outlined exactly what had happened, how it had made me feel, and what I wanted moving forward. I concluded with, I have consulted with a lawyer who believes I have grounds for legal action. However, I would prefer to resolve this as a family. I am requesting joint ownership of the cabin, with clear usage rights established for both Lily and myself. If we cannot reach an agreement on this, I will pursue legal remedies to recover my investment. I need your response within 7 days. With a deep breath, I hit send, and then forwarded the email to Uncle Robert with a note asking him to help facilitate a resolution. The next morning, I had 3 missed calls from my mother, 1 from my father, and a text from Lily that simply read, "This is ridiculous. You're being so dramatic." Uncle Robert called around noon. They want to meet again. Sunday at my house. Neutral territory. I agreed, feeling a strange calm. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had clearly stated what I needed without apology or compromise. Whatever happened next, I had finally advocated for myself. Uncle Robert's Victorian home in Brookline had always been a place of warmth and fairness in my childhood. The smell of Aunt Martha's apple pie greeted me as I arrived, a small comfort before the storm. "She's stress baking," Uncle Robert explained with a gentle smile. "For pies since morning." The living room had been arranged with intention, chairs positioned to avoid anyone having their back to another, coffee and tea service prepared on the side table, tissues discreetly available. My parents arrived next, both looking tired and tense. My mother tried to hug me, but I stepped back, not ready for that gesture of affection. Her face fell, but she nodded in understanding. Lily arrived last, making an entrance in designer sunglasses she didn't remove immediately, despite being indoors. When she finally took them off, I was surprised to see her eyes were red-rimmed. She'd been crying. Uncle Robert took charge immediately. "We're here to find a solution that acknowledges everyone's interests and rights. I've asked James and Sarah to come prepared with open minds." He looked pointedly at my parents. "And I've asked Lily and Sam to listen to each other without interrupting." He turned to me. "Sam, since you called this meeting, please start by explaining exactly what you want to see happen." I had rehearsed this moment, determined to stay calm and factual. "I want joint ownership of the cabin. Lily and I would share the deed 50-50, with clear legal agreements about usage rights and responsibilities. The cabin stays in the family, as Grandpa intended, not as a commercial property." Lily immediately started to protest, but Uncle Robert held up his hand. "You'll have your turn, Lily." I continued. "I recognize that Lily may have plans and expectations now, but the cabin was saved with my money on the understanding it would remain a family gathering place. That's non-negotiable for me." Uncle Robert nodded. "And if this doesn't happen? Then I'll file a lawsuit to recover my investment plus interest," I said, my voice steady. "My lawyer is confident we have a strong case for fraudulent misrepresentation." My father frowned. "There was no fraud. We didn't know it was your money." "You didn't ask," I countered. "And you made promises about the cabin's future that you broke the moment you transferred the deed to Lily." Uncle Robert turned to my sister. "Lily, your response." She straightened in her chair. "This is completely unfair. Mom and Dad gave me the cabin legally. I've already invested in renovations. I have a business plan that will finally make me financially independent. Sam is just jealous because for once something good is happening for me instead of her. Jealous. I repeated, incredulous. I paid off the mortgage on a property that was then given to you without my knowledge. This isn't about jealousy. It's always about jealousy with you. Lily shot back. You can't stand that Mom and Dad wanted to help me succeed for once instead of just applauding your perfect life. Perfect life. I stood up, emotion finally breaking through my careful composure. Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed to build my career? The relationships I've neglected? The sleep I've lost? I have worked for everything I have while you've had endless second chances and financial bailouts. Enough. Uncle Robert's voice cut through our escalating argument. This isn't productive. Aunt Martha appeared with a tray of coffee and pie, her timing impeccable. The brief interruption allowed everyone to take a breath and reset. When we resumed, Uncle Robert addressed my parents. James, Sarah, you transferred the cabin to Lily knowing Sam had contributed financially to save it. How do you justify that decision? My father shifted uncomfortably. We didn't know the extent of Sam's contribution. We thought it was a family fund of some kind. And if you had known? Uncle Robert pressed. My mother spoke up, her voice small. We would have handled it differently. We should have talked to Sam first, at the very least. And now that you do know? Uncle Robert continued. My parents exchanged glances. My father sighed. We want what's best for both our daughters. We never intended to hurt Sam. Intent isn't the issue here, I said. Actions are. And your actions showed a complete disregard for my contribution and for Grandpa's wishes for the cabin. Lily rolled her eyes. Here we go with Grandpa again. He's been gone for years, Sam. People move on. Something in her dismissive tone triggered a memory. I reached into my bag and pulled out the wooden chest set I'd rescued from the dumpster. I placed it on the coffee table. Do you remember when Grandpa made this for me? I asked Lily. Do you remember how he spent months carving each piece by hand, even with his arthritis getting worse? She looked away. It's just an old chess set. No, it's not, I said firmly. It's a physical manifestation of love. Just like that cabin. Every board, every nail. Every piece of furniture he crafted, it was all an expression of his love for this family. I turned to my parents. When you called me about losing the cabin, I didn't hesitate. Not because it's a valuable piece of real estate, but because it represents our family history, our connections to each other. I couldn't bear to see that lost. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We didn't understand. You should have, I said simply. You knew what that place meant to me. To all of us. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. I think we need to address the financial reality here. Sam invested a substantial sum with a specific understanding. That can't be ignored or dismissed. For the next hour, we talked through various scenarios. Lily remained resistant to joint ownership, clinging to her vision of a luxury rental property. My parents waffled, torn between acknowledging my right to partial ownership and their desire to support Lily's business venture. The breakthrough came unexpectedly from Lily herself. Can I speak to Sam alone? She asked suddenly. Everyone looked surprised, but nodded. We moved to Uncle Robert's study, closing the door behind us. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then Lily's carefully maintained facade cracked. I'm failing, Sam, she whispered. Again. The renovation is already over budget. The business plan has holes. I just needed to succeed at something. Anything. I hadn't expected this vulnerability. Why this? Why the cabin that means so much to me? Because it was available, she admitted. And because I'm jealous of you. You make everything look so easy. It's not easy, I said. I work incredibly hard. I know. That's another reason I'm jealous. I don't have your discipline or focus. I never have. She wiped at a tear. When Mom and Dad offered me the cabin, it felt like finally they believed in me. Like they thought I could actually make something work. We talked for nearly an hour, really talked, perhaps for the first time as adults. She confessed her sense of inadequacy living in my shadow. I admitted my resentment over the different standards our parents had set for us. I don't want to sue my sister, I said finally. But I can't just let this go, Lily. It's too important. She nodded slowly. What if we did share ownership, but still developed it as a rental for part of the year? Not a full-time Airbnb, but maybe during peak seasons when neither of us is using it. It wasn't perfect, but it was a starting point. We would need clear agreements about preserving the character of the place. No more dumpsters full of family heirlooms. I saved some things, she admitted. The dining table is in storage. And those old photos. When we emerged from the study, everyone looked at us expectantly. We might have the beginning of a compromise, I said. Over the next hour, with Uncle Robert's steady guidance, we hammered out the framework of an agreement. Lily and I would share ownership equally. The cabin would be available for family use during key holidays and summer weeks. Limited rental opportunities would be explored for off-peak times, with profits split between us after a portion was set aside for maintenance and improvements. My father, seeing a path to resolution, became unexpectedly practical. You'll need a formal operating agreement, and you should both have wills that address the cabin specifically. And family therapy, my mother added quietly. All four of us. These issues go deeper than just the cabin. Uncle Robert nodded approvingly. That's an excellent suggestion, Sarah. As the meeting wound down, my lawyer's draft letter remained undelivered in my bag. We had found a path forward without legal threats, though the option remained if the agreement fell apart during formalization. Lily approached me as we were preparing to leave. I'm sorry, Sam. Not just about the cabin, but for not seeing how much you've sacrificed over the years. It wasn't a complete resolution. Years of family dynamics couldn't be resolved in one afternoon, but it was a start. As I hugged Uncle Robert goodbye, he whispered, Grandpa Charles would be proud of you today. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope that something positive might emerge from this painful chapter. 1 year later, I stood on the dock at Cedar Pines, watching the June sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. The cabin behind me was different than it had been a year ago, modernized in some ways, but with its soul intact. The transition hadn't been seamless. There had been tense moments during the legal formalization of our shared ownership agreement. The first family therapy session had ended with my mother in tears and my father walking out. Lily and I had argued over budget priorities during the modified renovation, but we had persevered. The cabin now featured updated plumbing and a more functional kitchen, but Grandpa's handmade furniture had been restored and returned to its rightful place. The dining table, sanded and refinished, still bore the marks of decades of family meals. The rocking chairs, reupholstered but structurally unchanged, flanked the fireplace once again. The changes mirrored the evolution in our family relationships, improved but with the original foundation preserved. I heard footsteps on the dock and turned to see Lily approaching with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, despite the warm evening. Tradition is tradition, she said, handing me one. We stood in companionable silence, watching a loon glide across the water's surface. The Henderson family arrives tomorrow, Lily noted. Their daughter is celebrating her 8th birthday. First time at a lake. We had compromised on the rental aspect. The cabin was available to family first, always, but we rented it to selected families during specific weeks. Not for maximum profit, but to families who would appreciate the magic of the place as we had. The modest income covered maintenance costs and funded ongoing improvements. Did you show them where the life jackets are? And the fishing gear? I asked. Lily nodded. And I left Grandpa's bird identification book on the shelf for the kids. The Henderson girl is apparently an aspiring ornithologist. I smiled, remembering my own childhood fascination with the lake's birds. She'll love it here. Inside the cabin, I could hear my parents moving around the kitchen, preparing dinner. Our monthly family weekends at the cabin had become a healing ritual. Sometimes awkward, occasionally tense, but increasingly genuine. The family therapy sessions had revealed decades of dysfunctional patterns. My parents had placed impossible expectations on me while enabling Lily's dependence. I had fueled the dynamic by never communicating my needs. Lily had learned to use dramatic crises to secure attention and support. None of us was entirely victim or villain, just flawed humans trying to navigate complicated relationships. Sam, Lily said suddenly, I never properly thanked you for saving this place. Not just the money, but for fighting for what it represents. I couldn't let it go, I admitted. This place is part of who I am. It's part of who I am too, she said. I just didn't realize how much until I almost lost it and you last year. Inside my personal life, changes had blossomed as well. The boundaries I learned to establish with my family extended to other relationships. I had negotiated a more balanced work schedule, started dating more seriously, and even taken my first 2-week vacation in years, a hiking trip through the Pacific Northwest that Grandpa would have loved. My savings account was growing again, though more slowly than before. The financial setback of the cabin payment had adjusted my timeline for homeownership, but not eliminated it. And somehow, the delay didn't bother me as much as it once had. I had gained something more valuable than property, self-advocacy, and authentic family relationships. As we headed inside for dinner, I paused to run my fingers over the initials carved into the main support beam. CW plus JW. Below them, barely visible unless you knew to look, were newer markings. SW plus LW. Carved last Thanksgiving when we'd officially completed the restoration. The oak dining table was set for 4, candles flickering in the center. My father looked up as we entered. Just in time, he said, bringing a steaming dish to the table. Your mother's made Grandma Jean's lasagna recipe. As we settled around the table that had held 4 generations of our family, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for longer than I cared to admit. The cabin hadn't just been saved physically, its true purpose as a family anchor had been restored. Later that evening, as Lily and my parents played Scrabble by the fire, I stepped outside for a moment alone. The stars shone brilliantly in the clear Vermont sky, and in the distance, a loon called hauntingly across the water. We kept our promise, Grandpa, I whispered to the night air. It wasn't easy, but we found our way back to what matters. The journey had taught me that advocating for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. That family love should be equitable, not equal. That some betrayals can become doorways to deeper understanding if you're brave enough to walk through them. Most importantly, I'd learned that true family means seeing each other clearly, flaws, strengths and all, and choosing to love anyway. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who took you for granted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please subscribe if you found meaning in my journey and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to advocate for yourself, even with those you love most. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most painful conflicts lead to the most authentic connections. I'll see you next week with another story from my life.